So we're getting back into the area of the river that we call the junction, or the north branch that we're on, the main branch, and the south branches all meet up together. You have to understand this river is essential to Chicago. If this river was not here, the city might not exist because Marquette and Joliet would have never come up this way, and then I'd be working at a cheese shop in my hometown of Wisconsin. Who knows? I like cheese, that's all right. That's part of the river, though, as we get into it. You'll see it makes a Y shape, like the letter Y. Something you can do that doesn't cost any money when you're walking around town is to look for Y shapes, insert it into different insignias, logos, even some of the bridge work will use it. And people use that Y shape in their signage simply to represent the river and how important it is to Chicago. Biggest example I can think of to start you off with is on State Street. The Chicago Theater marquee has a Y in its background, so you can start there and move your way outwards. We're going to go underneath the Lake Street Bridge next. Lake along with Wells are the two double-deck bridges in the city that carry elevated or L trains up on the top levels, cars and pedestrians on the bottom. We have 37 movable bridges in Chicago. It's more than any other city in the world. I'm going to explain to you guys how they work a little bit later on. In the meantime, though, the next point that I need to make is that all of the buildings I would like to show you on the right-hand side of the South Branch here, they all have one thing in common. And that is that they are all constructed in a manner known as air rights construction. What that means is we've got all these railroad tracks on this vacant lot off to the right. Those railroad tracks end up disappearing underneath the upcoming buildings. The people like Metra and Amtrak that own those trains, they own the land the tracks are on. They can't resell the land for construction development because that would negate them owning it in the first place. Whoever bought that land, if they really wanted to, they could tear up the train tracks, they could block them, they could do whatever they wanted to do. So the train people had to get smart. They started selling the airspace above the train tracks. Then what they do is they take these big, huge pillars called caissons. They drive the caissons very deeply into the ground to act like giant stilts. They build a platform above the stilts, and then the buildings go up normal from there. And that allows the trains to continue on their paths to and from the train stations underneath all the buildings. It's a pretty simple process when it's said and done. The exception to that simplicity is the Boeing building here on the right. Boeing was built in 1990 by Perkins and Will. They sit partially above switching tracks. Switching tracks is when there's a whole bunch of railroad tracks all right next to each other. There's no space in between them to put any caissons into the ground to support the southwest corner of this building from underneath. They had to go from up above. They put trusses on the outside lower portion of the Boeing building. The trusses hold up the southwest corner and redistribute that weight to the other three corners of the building. After we clear this bridge, if you would like to look behind you, you'll be able to see they left the trusses exposed. Ralph Johnson was the lead architect on that project. He chose to leave the trusses uncovered to remind you of the steelwork of the bridges along the Chicago River. It's a nifty feat of engineering at Boeing. And so next up on the right, we have 2 North Riverside Plaza. This is built in 1929 by Halliburton and Root. It was the first building in Chicago to use air rights construction, and originally it was home to the Chicago Daily News, a newspaper. So all the pictures or bas reliefs that you see etched in along the side of the building up there, they all depict scenes from the history of printing, Gutenberg, the printing press, stuff like that. 2 North Riverside Plaza is connected to the Ogilvie Transportation Center, which sits behind it. So if you do like a quarter turn over your right shoulders after the bridge, Ogilvie is going to be the shiny blue building that has a Citibank logo peeking up from the top of the second tower. Ogilvie was built in 1987 by Murphy & Yawn. It has 1.6 million square feet of floor space, and I think it looks like a giant waterfall. But a lot of people see the silhouette of that building along with the Citibank logo, and they tell me it looks like a giant cash register. Tomato, tomato, what are you going to do? Now that we're over here, though, you can see underneath these buildings, see the trains, see the caissons, and get a better sense of how air rights construction all works. Starting with the first building we're passing here on the right, and continuing with the next few along the river, these buildings comprise what we call Gateway Center. And they have super duper creative names like Gateways 1, 2, 3, and Steve. No, it's not Steve. That would be a silly name for a building. It's Roger. It's number 4. I have to have fun too. If you smile, it might make the sun come out. You never know. But Gateways 1 and 2 are identical glass and steel 20-story boxes built in 1965 and 67 respectively by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. When you look at them, they are the epitome of modern architecture. If you want to impress your friends with newfound architectural lingo, you can refer to that style of building as Miesian. Earlier we talked a little bit about Ludwig Mies van der Rohe in conjunction with the IBM building, he being the father of modern architecture. Well, even though Mies van der Rohe had nothing to do with the design plans for those buildings, the way that he felt about architectural design was very influential to a lot of architects like Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And Mies's philosophy was very simple. He coined the phrase, less is more. He meant the less ornamentation and decoration that you put on the outside of a building, the more form and function you're able to afford to put inside the building. The little guy on the right with the giant X's on it, that's the old commodities exchange. It's a great way to show you how the Hancock building was constructed, but on a smaller scale. Just like the Hancock building, both were designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, but neither building has any columns inside holding up the different floors or the ceiling for that matter. The giant X's on the outside of both buildings are not for decoration. Those are structural. Those X's are called cross bracings. They hold up the buildings from the outside, so the outside does all the work, and then inside you get extra square footage because there's no columns taking up all the space. Gateway number 4 was built in 1983, and this is a good example of contextualism. Contextual architecture is when a building takes into consideration its site and its surroundings. It has a gentle curve that follows a natural bend in the river, and it uses green tinted glass windows like a lot of other buildings on the river to mimic the natural color of the water. We do dye the river really bright green for St. Patrick's Day. It's not a myth, happens every year. The river is naturally this pale shade of green because of the clay bottom, the algae that grows on it, and the infusion of Lake Michigan water. Next up on the right then, we're going to have another behemoth of a building. This one is the old Central Post Office, built in 1932 by Graham Anderson Probst & White. When in operation, it was the largest in the world. We needed so much space because Chicago was once home to a lot of mail order catalog businesses like Sears and Roebuck. If you're old enough like me and remember when we used to get those catalogs in the mail, especially at Christmas, they were huge. That's why they needed 2.7 million square feet of floor space. But as the catalog companies started moving out of the city into the suburbs, we were left with this big rambling building that became inefficient simply because it was so large. So in 1996, they shut her down and built a new one. You might recognize the old post office if you're fans of the Batman movies that have been filmed in Chicago. For example, The Dark Knight, they use the old post office as the bank that they robbed right at the beginning of the film. So I know that the post office looks a little bit run down, but it's a post office. It belongs to the federal government. So there's been a lot of talk over the years, what's going to happen to that beautiful historic building? A few years ago, I got excited. The big rumor was they were going to turn it into a casino. Oh, I was jazzed. Well, they shot that down, and now I will never be a blackjack dealer. There goes that lifelong dream. They did auction it off 2 years ago to an English guy for $40 million. Sadly, that deal fell through, so it's still up for grabs. If you got $1 bajillion and you're in the market for a post office, that's your guy. What do you